Hi everyone, and welcome back to my channel where I challenge myself to make something I've never made before every week. And this week is an extra super special one because I'm going to conquer one of my fear recipes. So in the past, I've tried to make pastries once and it went horribly wrong, so ever since I've basically never made any kind of pastry. Until now, because today I'm going to make croissants. And I'm extra excited because I'm going to be following Claire Saffitz' recipe, whose channel and personality I absolutely love. And also probably the only baker I will trust to guide me through this. So without any further procrastination, let's just get started. Alright guys, I was pretty nervous for this recipe, but what got me through was to remember that I could just do things one step at a time. And so our first step will be to make the dough. And like a lot of doughs, I'm going to first mix together the dry ingredients. Although you probably want to use a whisk for this one. And then in the middle of the dry ingredients, I'll make a well and add the water and the milk. Like a lot of baking recipes, we want our water and milk to be at room temperature to make sure that it doesn't really mess with the temperature of the dough and the butter later. I did personally have to add like a tad more water just because my dough is a little dry, but when the dough comes together, I'll let it rest for about 10 minutes before we add the butter. With the stand mixer running, I'll add in the butter that I cut into small pieces earlier and just let the stand mixer keep mixing until completely smooth. You'll definitely need to stop the stand mixer and scrape the dough off the dough hook every now and again to make sure that the butter is being spread evenly. Honestly, for a while, I didn't think that the butter would incorporate, but about 10 minutes later, I got a nice elastic and completely non-sticky dough. Before letting the dough rise, I'm going to do one extra step, which will help the dough rise into a more rectangular shape, which, if there's one thing that I learned about making croissants, it's that the shape is very important. And so with a sharp knife, I'm going to be making two perpendicular, pretty deep cuts into the dough before putting it back into the stand mixer bowl, covering with some plastic wrap and letting it rise until it's 1.5 times its original size. In the meantime, I'm going to make our butter block that will be the source of all of those delicious flaky layers. And so I'm going to roughly fold parchment paper over 3 sticks of butter. And then with a rolling pin, I'm going to relieve all of my stress until the butter block is about 1/2 inch thick. And then I'll unfold the parchment and refold so it's exactly an 8 inch by 8 inch square. We're gonna want those straight and sharp edges, so make sure to crease your paper well. And also to use a ruler to measure exactly 8 inches. And then with a rolling pin, I'll roll the butter until it fills the parchment paper in a uniform thickness. You might need to pound it a bit more if the butter is not quite cooperating with you, but eventually it'll be soft enough that you can just roll it right into the corners. And voila! We have the most satisfying butter square, which I will let chill in the refrigerator until we need it. As for our dough, after it's risen to about 1.5 times its size, we're going to let it chill in the refrigerator for at least 4 hours. After the rise, the dough should be about 2 times its size. And as you can see, it's like kinda sorta into a roundish rectangle. We're gonna take that rectangle and wrap it in plastic wrap no bigger than 8 inches by 8 inches. And I'm using a pretty big piece of plastic wrap because we're going to reuse this later. And then, as close as we can get it, we're going to roll the dough into the corners so it fills the plastic wrap. And then we'll let the dough freeze for about 20 minutes to lower the temperature. Up to this point, I think the process is mostly the same as making bread, but now we start making croissants. By first encasing the butter inside of our dough. At this point, the measurements are very important, so we're going to try to be as exact as possible with our ruler. And also trying to keep the sides as straight as possible as well. When the dough is the right size, I'm going to very carefully put the butter block in the middle of the dough and then fold the top and the bottom parts together to meet above the butter. Don't worry if it's not quite there, you can just pull and tug and pinch until they meet right in the middle. And we'll also pinch the sides to keep the butter from leaking out that way as well. And then we're going to start the folding process. At this point, I do highly recommend watching Claire's video because she provides a lot of good tips on how to try to keep your dough as square-like as possible. But I think one thing she doesn't tell you is how much time it takes to roll out this dough. It could be that I'm just trying to be way too careful, but it legitimately took me like 20 to 30 minutes to roll out the dough to the correct size. But eventually, when my dough was about half an inch thick, I'll fold the top and the bottom to meet in the middle, and then fold the whole thing in two. And at this point, you can probably see why we wanted to keep it as uniform sides as possible, which for my dough, there is some peeking out of the sides, which will affect the layers later on, but don't worry if yours is not completely uniform, especially if you're making croissants the first time. I promise that it'll turn out well anyways. But regardless, after the dough has had sufficient chilling time, we're going to roll it again. And then, unlike last time, I'm going to fold it into thirds for a grand total of 12 layers, which honestly I thought was not that many layers. Definitely thought that I would be folding and rolling a lot longer. But luckily for me and my sanity, it's the last time. I'll chill it one more time before pre-shaping it to be the size that we want tomorrow. I'm aiming for about 14 by 17 inches, but unfortunately for me, I actually don't have a baking sheet large enough to hold a 14 by 17 inch piece of dough, so I stopped a little bit sooner. But regardless, I'm going to wrap this dough super tight in a lot of sheets of plastic wrap and then leave it overnight. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the second day in which we'll cut, proof, and bake our croissants. But first, I'm going to take the dough that we chilled yesterday and actually try to roll it to 14 by 17. I do make a mistake here and I don't roll it all the way across, so unfortunately some of my strips are not going to be 4 inches across, which means I have some croissants that are smaller, and I'll show you the effects of that later. But regardless, I'm going to cut the dough into these strips and then cut each of the strips into triangles. You can probably tell that my dough is not that straight across, but don't worry, it all turns out okay. But now for the rolling part. First, I'm going to cut off a little bit of the end to make it into an isosceles triangle, and then tug on each of the corners, I think to make the shape a little more appealing. And then it's time to roll. You want to be gentle with the dough, but also you don't want a lot of holes when you're rolling it. I don't really have any tips for that, but boy oh boy is it fun to roll a croissant. And the end product is so cute! I think there's just something about all this work that you put in actually starting to look like a croissant. But this was probably my favorite step in the entire process. I'm gonna proof these in the oven that has the skillet of warm water in it until it's doubled in size and a little jiggly when you wobble it. Alright guys, we're almost done. The last step before baking is just to put a little bit of an egg wash on them to make sure they're all beautiful and golden when they come out of the oven. And these will bake for about 30 minutes in total or until golden brown.
And with the winter comes the ice, the snow, but I'm here to hold.
Yay! It's time to eat. You can see that the slightly smaller ones burned a little bit. So honestly, I would just recommend baking them separately if you have different size croissants. And even though this project took all of my Saturday and honestly most of my Sunday, this moment was worth all of it. The outside is crackly and crunchy and the inside is so buttery and soft. To me, it's on the caliber of any freshly baked croissant that you can get at a bakery. Honestly, I was a little emotional after eating this croissant because for a while making it, I was worried that, oh, my sides aren't straight, this rectangle isn't the right size. But in the end, I persevered and now I have, to me, a perfect croissant. And honestly, something that kept the anxiety at bay was definitely Claire's video, which was so absolutely detailed on every little step that I never felt like I had to guess at what to do. And also, her clear love of baking is super infectious and just makes me want to bake everything. In fact, pretty much immediately after I filmed this, I bought her cookbook, so if there's anything else that you want to see me bake from Claire, let me know in the comments below. But alright guys, that's it from me for today. If you guys enjoyed my croissant escapades, please make sure to like and subscribe. I come out with a new video every Monday. Except next Monday because I'm going on vacation. But anyways, I'll see you guys next time. Bye!